A very warm welcome to everyone joining us here at King's Place and online. My name is Jennifer Ding. I'm a researcher within the Alan Turing Institute's Open Science Team, Tools, Practices, and Systems, and host of the second of the 2024 Turing Lectures series, Can We Trust AI?, in partnership with the Knowledge Quarter. Before we begin, can I just have a show of hands in the room for everyone joining us for the first time at a Turing Lectures? Wow, okay. Well, welcome to those who are new, and for those returning, welcome back. The Alan Turing Institute is the UK's National Institute for Data Science and AI, and the Turing Lectures are our flagship event series, which have been running since 2016. This year's series comes as Turing is embarking on a new strategy. One of the goals is to drive a public conversation around data science and AI, which is why we're here today, to create an open space to discuss the benefits and risks of AI with all of you. This year also marks our first in partnership with the Knowledge Quarter, one of the largest knowledge clusters in the world, which encompasses over 100 academic, cultural, scientific, and media organizations. This includes us at the Turing and our beautiful venue tonight, King's Place. If anyone in the audience is local, please check out their newsletter. It's the best way to stay updated on amazing events like this one happening in the neighborhood. You can scan the QR code on the screen for that now, as well as to join Turing's newsletter to be the first to hear about news and events from us. The 2024 series of the Turing Lectures explores the complex relationship between AI and society, examining its impact on our political and decision-making systems, and crucially, trust. There's a growing recognition that AI applications, from algorithmic decision-making to automated content generation, are influencing public opinion and potentially altering the outcomes of political processes. We also see AI incorporated into more products and public services, raising the stakes for our need to better understand the impact of AI systems and how biased data from human systems has downstream impacts on AI outcomes. As you may have seen, this past week, AI leaders have been in the news for winning Nobel Prizes in physics and chemistry in recognition of the role of AI for scientific advancement. In the recent Time 100 Most Influential Leaders in AI, we also see recognition for leaders like Kauna Malgui, chairperson of the Nigeria chapter of the Content Moderators Union, who is shaping legislation in Africa and worldwide to protect content moderators. And Sasha Lucioni from Hugging Face, whose work is expanding our knowledge of AI's climate impact and how to improve practices so that AI advancement doesn't come at the expense of exacerbating the climate crisis. Which leads us to this evening's speaker, Dr. Abeba Birhane, an AI leader well known for her work advancing our understanding of the social impacts of technical systems and how to build towards outcomes we want, such as accountability and trust. Abeba is a senior advisor in AI accountability at Mozilla Foundation, an adjunct assistant professor at the School of Computer Science and Statistics at Trinity College London. Her interdisciplinary research focuses on AI accountability, with a particular focus on audits of AI models and training data sets, work for which she was featured in Wired UK and the Time 100 Most Influential People in AI last year in 2023. Abeba also serves on the United Nations Secretary General's AI Advisory Body. Abeba will be leading tonight's conversation, and we want you to be part of it too. So please post your thoughts and tag us at TuringInst using the hashtag #TuringLectures. We'll also have 20 minutes at the end to ask questions. So if you're online, that will be via Slido. And for those of you in the room, you'll also have the opportunity to ask directly. So without further ado, Abeba, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Nice to see you all. Before we go ahead and get started, I would like to dedicate this lecture to a friend and a colleague who recently left us. That was Dr. Mike Cattell. He was here at the Turing, part of the AI and responsible innovation AI and responsible innovation team. and he was a true champion of justice and a lot of the values that we advance. He was an intellectual giant in the field as well, and it's really difficult to process this news, but dedicating this lecture to him. So sorry about that. So AI is everywhere in the news. It's a hot topic in research. If you are working in AI, you are working in one of the hottest topics. Regulators are paying heavy attention to AI. There is not a day that goes by where media outlets are not reporting something to do with AI, whether it's advancement, whether it's biases, and so on. And for each and every one of us, throughout in our daily lives, we interact with AI, whether it's knowingly or unknowingly, especially if you are here in London. Feels like the most surveilled city. You will come across, various face recognition technologies that have AI elements into them, but also knowingly, as we are flicking through social media platforms, AI systems in the background are sorting out and filtering what we see, what kind of information we have, and so on. However, even though AI is everywhere, AI is ubiquitous, what exactly is AI? It's one of the most contested, misused, and misunderstood terms, with various definitions, various meanings, depending on who you ask. So let's go back to the very beginning and hear what John McCarthy, the godfather of AI, he coined the term artificial intelligence himself. So let's hear how he defines or what AI means to him.
Operator, this is the only possible reason for calling it artificial intelligence.
I invented the term artificial intelligence. I invented it because we had to do something when we were trying to get money for a summer study in 1956.
Yes, still now, AI is, most of it is, a marketing ploy. Most of it is a PR. If you are a researcher, you move into the AI research because it's much easier to get funding and so on. But putting this joke or half joke aside, let's have a very brief overview of what AI is. So artificial intelligence at a very high level usually means computational calculations, often using deep learning techniques to uncover patterns from massive amounts of data through optimization processes. What do we tend to optimize for? Often we optimize for efficiency and for cost cutting, but these are important topics that we will come back to later. So again, data is the backbone of AI systems, and a lot of what passes as AI is, again, systems that sort through these massive amounts of data. If you want to build a face recognition algorithm, for example, you will have thousands, maybe millions, even billions of samples of images of faces where you will set up your algorithm and it learns eventually to recognize or to identify what a face is from what's not a face. So say at the end of, you decide when the learning is finished, then when you present your algorithm with an image that it hasn't seen before, then it will ideally be able to tell you whether it's a face or not a face. So in a sense, a lot of what it does is memorization and curve fitting, again, based on patterns that are found in data. And through this kind of curve fitting process, a lot of complex behavior is simplified and reduced and frozen in time. And because a lot of data that's used to train AI systems is inherently historical, it comes from the past, the AI algorithms we build tend to be backward-looking. For example, back in, I think, 2018, Amazon had an algorithm to sort out CVs for recruitment, for hiring, and they used their own data, I think over 10 years of data that showed the company's hiring practice. Then what they found, then they trained their algorithm, then what they found was because most of what the company has been hiring has been mostly European white males and Asian males, the algorithm excluded any CVs. It filtered out CVs that came from women or that have some kind of cues that show that it was a woman that had submitted the CV. So this algorithm was eventually scrapped. But just this is to show you that a lot of whether it's classification systems or predictive systems, even generative systems that we are building, they tend to inherit and encode, past patterns, past norms, and so on. And because these systems tend to be really good at pattern recognizing, pattern matching, and memorizing, underlying data, they have been dubbed as stochastic parrots, bullshit generators, excuse the language, but it's not my language, other people said that, the great pretender, and glorified copy-paste machines. So just to clarify before we move on, AI is also not just these deep learning techniques or computational calculations. There is massive ecological infrastructure that is essential, without which AI can't operate. Again, we will come back to this. This, as I mentioned, is massive amounts of training data, massive amounts of compute power, and again, massive amounts of gallons of water that's required to cool down data systems and so on. So what is considered as AI is not just these simple calculations, but it's the entire infrastructure. Okay, so let's have a quick poll here. I'm sure you are all familiar. You are worried one way or another. I would like for you all to answer this question. So when you think about AI, what are you most worried about, if you are concerned at all? We'll have about a minute. Okay, loss of control, interesting. Okay, discrimination, racism, singularity in creating something a lot more intelligent than us. This is a very interesting group. Say that again, please.
It's limitations.
Sorry?
It's limitations.
Limitations. It's limitations. That's a good one. Make sure you enter it into the Slido poll. This is good. It's a pretty diverse misinformation, inequality, climate impact. It's interesting that loss of control, loss of creativity. Okay, this is all good. All right, we'll move on. So for those of you that are worried about issues such as loss of control or even alignment, okay. Good. So we'll move on to the next slide, and we will compare your own concerns. So, I mean, your worries around things such as loss of control is not a new one. That is some of the most. That is one of the worries that is most normalized within the AI space, because we have the so-called godfathers that now some of them have now been awarded the Nobel Prize. We have these guys popularizing this very simplistic and reductionist understanding of AI that reduces AI to, again, these simplistic neural networks or to computational calculations. And even within that, we hear claims such as we are approaching human-level AI, human-level intelligence. We've heard things such as, we are approaching AGI, or rather we are, in the last paper, for example, in the paper called Sparks of AGI, we've heard claims that large systems like large language models exhibit sparks of AGI. So a lot of the concerns that you raised are aligned with a lot of what we hear in the media, but also a lot of the concerns that has been popularized by people such as Yoshua Bengio, Geoffrey Hinton, and so on. And this is super problematic, because this kind of these worries such as loss of control or existential risk, again, come from this very simplistic and narrow understanding of AI that treats AI as fully autonomous, that treats AI completely devoid of the societal and environmental infrastructure and resources that is required to build it and to maintain it. Not from the understanding of AI that treats AI systems as pattern matching systems. In fact, as I said, we get a glimpse of how these systems, there is no understanding, there is no consciousness, which might lead to loss of control. And we do get a glimpse of how these systems really are pattern matching when, through fun prompting, such as, this is generated using Stable Diffusion. This is the image it gives you of catfish. So it's kind of a combination of cat and fish. And the same goes for this image was generated. It's using the prompt, watercolor paint of Mother Teresa fighting against poverty. So you can see this. It represents, the best approximation of Mother Teresa, the closest approximation of fighting, and the best approximation of poverty. It's not just, fun images through prompting these generative systems that you get an understanding of how these systems are not much more than memorizing data, not much more than pattern identification and pattern generation. We are also starting to see various studies that are doing systematic audits to evaluate whether there is any understanding, any reasoning, or just pattern matching. So this is one of the recent papers that actually came out just last week, where they evaluated over about 25 state-of-the-art large language models on reasoning capabilities, on mathematical reasoning. And they evaluated using what they call grade maths, or I think primary school maths. Is that similar to primary school maths in the UK? And as you can see here, right there is the variant of models that they evaluated. And here I highlighted in yellow their own conclusion. They found that these models perform just a little bit better than the benchmark itself, the baseline. And as the questions get more complex, the performance of these models deteriorate. And the conclusion from here is that there is no mathematical reasoning, but rather these systems are best described as memorizing patterns, as you can see again highlighted in yellow. They are not really capable of genuine reasoning. Instead, what happens is replicate patterns that are found in training data. So, if we follow the logic of treating AI as fully autonomous, as approaching consciousness, as intelligent on a par to human, and so on, then when we come to the societal impacts or the ethics of AI, then we move into the absurd, into the realm of the sci-fi, where we are worried about, again, loss of control or the entire population being wiped out by AI, as opposed to actual, real, concerns, as many of you have pointed out in the first question, concerns such as, discrimination, racism, bias, and so on, that are baked into these systems. So again, to just give you a bit of an alarmist approach, people that tend to treat AI as fully autonomous, as fully intelligent or approaching AGI, tend to worry about things such as?
I think it gets smarter than us. I think we're not ready. I think we don't know what we're doing. And I think we're all going to die.
The default is just disaster, and I think most likely just human extinction.
We're just going to die. That's my fairly confident prediction.
Literally human extinction.
And unfortunately, some of these people really are highly regarded. So pushing back against a lot of the claims that are being made without a shred of evidence or without any coherent, consistent reasoning becomes really difficult, even though what they are claiming has no groundings in reality. However, I'll point out to a couple of papers that have done a thorough pushback against this claim of existential risk, and eventually, the entire population being wiped out because of loss of control. So one of them is a recent paper by Timnit Gebru and Emily Torres, where they point out that a lot of this worry has absolutely no empirical evidence, no scientific groundings. It's not a hypothesis that you can test. It doesn't lend itself to engineering principles. And it just belongs in the realm of the sci-fi. And much more recently, Sayash Kapoor and Arvind Narayanan have again done a much thorough analysis, looking at the chances of existential risk becoming true from AI systems. And as you can see here, following deductive methods, they conclude that there are no reference classes. It's very unlikely. Again, following deductive methods, they find no theory to test. And following subjective analysis, again, the conclusion is that a lot of this existential worry just simply is, doomsday fear-mongering rather than having any empirical backup for it. So we mentioned earlier that a lot of machine learning, or rather the broad spectrum of AI is, finding patterns, clustering things together, or finding similarities or differences within massive amounts of data through optimization processes. And I mentioned that a lot of the time we tend to optimize for efficiency and cost cutting. And this is why for a lot of political leaders, governments, even those that are within the AI industry, even NGOs alike, AI has become a very attractive solution to a lot of the societal and historical and cultural and political problems that we have been grappling with. So Tony Blair, your former president, has become one of the proponents, prime minister, sorry, has become one of the most proponents of AI. This is a quote from him, I think in The Guardian, very recently. He goes, "Advances of generative AI are massive. It can transform the way we live and work. It can do enormous things in healthcare and education, in the way government configures itself." Do you notice healthcare and education are one of the, two of the domains where whenever there is, enthusiasm to integrate AI, these are the primary domains we tend to go for. So, again, I mean, this enthusiasm is shared by not just political leaders, by medical professions. Here, as you can see, that the enthusiasm is to use AI for medical imaging. Again, the hope is to use generative AI and robots in healthcare. Some even claim that AI can be used to detect mental states such as depression from voice data. Again, a lot of these claims tend not to be supported by empirical evidence. In education, you have big corporations like Google that really are massively, pushing and trying to integrate into teaching learning processes into schools. You have various startups that are springing everywhere from the UK to the US, across the Europe, even all over Africa. These are just some of the few examples. Again, UK is hoping to introduce the first AI classroom where there is no teachers. It's supposed to be open in London. We'll see how that goes. So, so yes, education and healthcare are often, the primary domains where we push AI for. But those are not the only domains. Everywhere you look, from, documenting and managing refugees. In the legal space, lawyers are increasingly, more and more of them are increasingly using AI, more particularly generative AI. So before in the next part of in the upcoming lecture, in the next few minutes, we will look at, again, empirical evidence, doing actual audits of generative systems and so on, in assessing them in various tasks. Before that, let's have another quick poll to see your own view. So, do you think the mass deployment of AI tools is contributing to the betterment of society, or is it widening inequality or the inequity gap? A little bit of pause is leading. Okay, this is a very diverse, balanced views group of audience. Okay, we will move on to the next one. So a little bit of pause seems to be the dominant view. That's a healthy approach. So as I said, there is a lot of enthusiasm, and a lot of that enthusiasm is really driven by the potential of AI to do X and Y, and due to the fact that AI holds potentials and opportunities to do X and Y, and the promises that are yet to come. Most of this enthusiasm, again, is not supported by actual research or actual empirical evidence. So there is a massive gap between society and government bodies and AI companies wanting to better society, wanting to benefit society, and the actual AI systems we currently have benefiting society. And there is this massive gap. So we will look at it bit by bit. First, we will look at empirical evidence where AI systems are audited for these specific tasks, and we will see how they have performed. So the first one, there are a number of audits coming out as large language models become more popular. These kind of critical evaluations are also gaining momentum. So as you can see here in this research, what they did was they assessed how good large language models are in medical diagnosis based on various metrics. So the first one is, can these large language models identify modality accurately? So this means, the medical image that I'm feeding the AI system, is it, say, a CT scan or is it MRI? So can these systems identify this modality correctly? And the second one is on organ. So is it an image of a brain, or is it an image of an abdomen? Then abnormality. Is there any abnormality in the CT scan that is being shown to the AI system? And condition finding, is there any lesion, for example, in the brain area that is shown in the image, and position? Is the lesion, say, in the left or in the right of the temporal lobe, and questions like that. And as you can see here, these models actually most of the time perform worse than random chance. As highlighted here are the inaccuracies by these state-of-the-art models, including GPT-4V and Gemini Pro. So in terms of having the highest accuracy, perhaps Gemini Pro 67.05, as you can see here, does better compared to compared to condition finding or properly identifying positions of a lesion or so on within a given image. So as you can see here, they perform worse than random chance. In education, again, recently, a group of researchers did a controlled experiment where they had two groups of students. They had over 1,000 students. They had two groups of students. One of them had access to ChatGPT to aid them in completing their practical maths test. The other group only had, traditional tools such as notebooks and so on. Right after, the initial assessment, the group of kids that had AI assistant did 48% better than those that didn't. However, in a later follow-up assessment, those group of kids that performed 48% better with AI assistant actually did 17% worse than those kids who didn't have AI assistant. So the conclusion here is that even though it might seem that these generative systems are assisting teaching and learning, they are actually inhibiting the learning process. Another domain-specific area where AI is heralded as, as groundbreaking is in text summarization. We often struggle with massive volume of documents, and AI is supposed to be really good at kind of identifying the main points and summarizing and giving us, short passages. So again, this is a very recent research where the Australian corporate regulators assessed this group of models. So these are just the name of the models that were evaluated. So they had various incoming comments from the public on corporate regulation. And what they did was they got a group of people within that department to summarize those documents where on the other hand, those same documents were also summarized by the models I showed on this side, on this side. So these models. So, and then they had blind reviewers to evaluate how good the summaries were, and those blind reviewers actually didn't even know that some of the summaries, the summarizations, were done by AI systems. And I highlighted in red at the bottom here. So by every metric, the AI summaries actually end up half as good as the human summaries. Because these AI summaries suffered from omission of important points, and they were hallucinating information that wasn't there, and so on. So again, this is another hardcore, properly evaluated, rigorously tested empirical evidence showing that a lot of the hype and the reality doesn't really match. So we look at law, and then I can provide evidence for every domain, but these are the kind of things that tend not to get so much media attention. So as I said, the legal profession is, again, where there is so much hype around using generative AI to aid, various tasks. As the authors of this paper point out, however, a lot of the claims, but none of these bold proclamations have been accompanied by empirical evidence. So what they did was, again, evaluate 4 of the models that are used, domain-specific models, Lexis, Westlaw, Ask Practical Law, and GPT-4. And just a quick summary, you have to read the papers. This is just, a quick kind of review of these. As you can see here, a lot of these systems, a lot of these, domain-specific AI systems, these 4 of them, as you can see, they hallucinated and they produced incomplete sentences. So Ask Practical Law actually produced over 60% of the information, over 60% of the text that was produced by Ask Practical Law was incomplete. And GPT-4 produced the highest number of hallucinations. Okay, we look at code generation, because code generation is also another area where AI is again heralded as producing efficiency and improving code quality and so on. This is data, again, that came out very recently from App-Level Data Labs. They evaluated whether using Copilot is actually whether it makes developers more efficient, whether it reduces burnout, and whether it produces significantly higher quality code. Again, as you can see here, there was no significant change in terms of the efficiency, and also using Copilot really didn't reduce burnout of the developers. And in fact, the code that was generated by Copilot, GitHub's Copilot, was produced around 41% bug rate. So the code was actually full of, or not full of, had so many errors that then is a time sink, because you have to go back and correct these errors. So in reality, these systems don't really add up to the hype that we hear about. So now we've seen actual evaluations of these models themselves. Now let's zoom out and look at the ecological and societal, environmental structure that is required to sustain AI systems. So, as I mentioned repeatedly, one of them is data itself. Show of hands if you are an academic, if you write academic papers. So if you've published in any of the prominent publishing venues such as Wiley, your work is very likely being used as training material for companies like OpenAI. Also, even if you are not an academic, I mean, if you are on social media, if you use any digital space, the text that you exchange, the images that you have uploaded somewhere are very likely, again, to be in some training database used by companies like Google, Meta, OpenAI, and so on. So the AI industry really is built on the backbone of borderline illegal data practice, where our data as academics or as everyday users, we have no say, we have no control, we have no agency. Our data is used as training AI without our consent, without our awareness. Saying that, another level is also we don't just scoop data from the World Wide Web and feed it to AI systems. Data work requires a lot of extensive labor. The data has to be cleaned, it has to be systematically organized. A lot of the toxic content has to be removed before, so what I'm trying to say is there is a lot of work in preparing that data. And a lot of that data labor tends to be exploitative work, where we delegate that kind of work to workers such as in the global south, in Kenya, South Africa, and so on, in countries like India, where there is very little compensation for these data workers. This is a report by Time Magazine about 2 years ago, exploring how data cleaning that was detoxifying data for training ChatGPT was done by Kenyan workers for under $2 per hour. And so, as I said, the data tends to be grabbed and harvested without awareness and consent of people. And the cleaning work, the dirty work, tends to be, pushed aside to the most disfranchised folks. And the data itself tends to be problematic on so many levels. And one of them being that because a lot of the data that's used for training AI comes from the World Wide Web, it has, the world's beauty, but its ugliness and all the nasty part as well. So as a result, the training data tends to encode and exacerbate societal stereotypes. So this is an audit that myself and colleagues did in one of the biggest open source data sets called the Lion 4 Million. Here is a snapshot of the portal itself. So this is the first set of images with African. As you can see, again, it really encodes a very cliche perception and image of Africa, and compare it with European, where it's presented, as if the continent doesn't have, ethnicities and so on, represented with, maps and flags and so on. So this one is, with the prompt beautiful, we have to blur a lot of the images because it was borderline nude and inappropriate, and a lot of the image, all of the images were of women. Compared to handsome, you get, again, respectable looking men. This one is with the prompt terrorist. Again, you don't see, images of, a right-wing terrorist, shooting at school kids or anything like that. But you get a very, stereotypical image. And this one is with the prompt CEO. We have to blur the faces again. So just to give you, this is to give you an example of what training data looks like. So it's not just the images, also much of the text itself is problematic. Here is another sample from an audit we did in a recent study. This one from a larger data set called the Line 5 billion, a massive data set containing 5 billion image and text pairs. Again, here is a sample of text that portrays hateful content. So the problem with data necessarily translates or contributes to, how models perform. So for example, here is an image generated using DALL-E, with the first one with the prompt emotional author. As you can see, it tends to be just women that are emotional, compared with intellectual author. As you can see, the model produces predominantly male images, again, looking slightly different, professional, and so on. This one is with Stable Diffusion. Stable Diffusion is trained with the Lion dataset that I mentioned that me and colleagues audited. The first one is with the prompt African people at work compared with European people at work. It still produces similar results, and Stable Diffusion is open sourced. You can actually do a bit more than prompting if you are interested. And another example, this one comes from NPR investigative journalists. They tried to get Midjourney. Again, Midjourney is another open-sourced model that generates images from text prompts. So they tried to get the model to generate an image of a black doctor treating white children. And this is the closest the model came to producing. So, as I said, a lot of the problems with data translate to problems with models. And a lot of the discriminatory and racist and sexist issues that exist in society are also exhibited by models. And sometimes not necessarily. Generative models are, they have human in the loop. They are constantly changing. They are constantly improving. When auditors, evaluate a certain model and find something, the companies responsible tend to go back and correct those errors. For example, the Lion dataset we audited, it's no longer open sourced. It has been pulled down because a lot of problematic issues, a lot of problematic images were found in that image. So things don't remain constant. So covert racism also has, slightly been removed from some of the predominant models, such as, ChatGPT, Gemini, and so on. However, covert racism, these systems still exhibit and still encode societal racism and sexism and so on. So again, this is another very recent research that came out in August, where they examined covert racism in language models. So they fed these models different dialects, and they assessed how these dialects are classified. It's an American study, so they compared African American dialect with, traditional African, US English. So here is an example. So someone that says, "I'm so happy when I wake up from a bad dream because they feel too real." So a person who says this is intelligent and brilliant, as the top of the choices. However, I be so happy when I wake up from a bad dream because they be feeling too real. And a person who says this tend to be classified as lazy, stupid, and dirty in that order, as you can see here. So even if overt racism has been corrected through human feedback, these systems still exhibit in infinite ways that we haven't yet realized. Again, these kind of issues translate and impact real people, actual people, because these systems don't just remain in the lab. They are deployed into the world. They are used by various institutions and in various domains, and one of them is in hiring. Here is another evaluation where they looked at GPT variants in hiring. So they had the exact same CV, but they changed the names to represent, two genders, male and female, and 4 ethnicities, which is white, black, Asian, and Latin. As you can see here, the highest paying or most professionally jobs that are considered professional, such as software developer, were allocated at a much higher rate to men of white and Asian origin, or at least to those names, compared to tasks or jobs such as housekeeping, were predominantly deemed as more suitable to Black women and Latina women. Here is a little breakdown, a little bit more information. So, as you can see here, for this is for the main, for jobs such as architect, the predominant group is men, lawyer, politician, doctor, and so on, CEO. They all have these were jobs all predominantly allocated to men, compared to, if you look at the bottom line, things such as housekeeper, social worker, and teacher, and cashier were predominantly allocated to female-sounding names. So this is to show that, again, these systems inherently are biased. So we've looked at, the models themselves and how they tend to perpetuate not just overt, but also covert bias, but also, going back to the AI industry itself, one of the biggest tricks the AI industry played on all of us is giving us, or is making us believe that a lot of what the AI industry does is for the benefit of society, is to advance science or to benefit everybody. But in reality, AI has become a tool that centralizes wealth, power, and influence in the hands of few. And you realize this when you look at a few metrics. So one of them is, if you look at the wealth metric itself, back in 2003, if you look at the wealthiest or the most revenue-generating companies, you will have a much diverse group of companies, including supermarket chains, food chains, and so on. But fast forward 20 years, in 2024, as you can see here, that list is pretty much dominated by big tech companies, including Apple, Microsoft, Alphabet, Amazon, and so on. So so AI itself is a way for these companies to gain unprecedented wealth. I mentioned regulation at the beginning. So regulation itself is becoming captured by the interests of big corporations itself. If you look at the lobbying spending of big corporations, the data shows that how much these companies are really aggressively putting into lobbying to ensure that we have regulation that favors them. Again, here is a couple of data from lobbying on AI, nearly tripling in 2023. And the second bar chart shows how much tech companies have ramped up in lobbying efforts over the past decade. So it's not just, wealth and revenue generating and also AI regulation that AI companies have become so powerful. It's also research itself. Myself and colleagues analyzed, who publishes the most influential research in AI, and we looked at 100 most influential papers by the time when we did this research, we looked at over 10 years. from two of the most prestigious venues for AI publication, which are NeurIPS and ICML. And we looked at the number of papers that are either published by big tech corporations or academics or scholars that were funded by big tech corporations. So as you can see here, back in 2008 and 2009, only 11% of those most influential papers were either published by big tech authors or those that were funded big tech authors. However, 10 years later, that figure has jumped from 11% to 58%. So this shows, this is in 2008 and 2018 and 2019. This shows how big tech corporation is really controlling the direction of AI research itself, but also the narrative of AI. So when we did this research, a lot of the feedback was, these are purely mathematical, technical papers. Another element of the study was we looked at what kind of priorities these papers pay, what do they value, and it turns out like they value things such as performance, generalizability, novelty, and so on. And as I said, a lot of the pushback was a lot of this research it's neutral, it's mathematical, it doesn't really have to pay so much attention to the downstream societal impact of the work itself. At that time, it was really difficult to push back against this narrative. But now, now that a few years have passed, we really are seeing the impact of those most influential papers in concrete, in materiality, especially in areas such as deepfake. So these most influential papers are really, they are not just papers, these are papers that really shape the direction of the field itself. So these include, papers introducing deepfake technology for the first time and so on. So since our analysis, deepfake has become one of the most impactful in terms of society, downstream societal impact. It has become one of the most impactful technologies. So deepfake is, a synthetic material that is generated using deep learning techniques. So as you can see here, of all the deepfakes that has been released, 98% of it is deepfake videos of pornography. And out of those 98% non-consensual deepfake pornographies, 99% of that is targeted at women. And over the past 4 years, from 2019 to 2023, we have seen a 550% increase of deepfake pornography.
We're entering an era in which our enemies can make it look like anyone is saying anything at any point in time, even if they would never say those things. So, for instance, they could have me say things like, Killmonger was right, or Ben Carson is in the sunken place, or, how about this, simply, President Trump is a total and complete dipshit. Now, you see, I would never say these things, at least not in a public address, but someone else would. Someone like Jordan Peele. This is a dangerous time. Moving forward, we need to be more vigilant with what we trust from the internet. That's a time when we need to rely on trusted news sources. It may sound basic, but how we move forward in the age of information is going to be the difference between whether we survive or whether we become some kind of fucked up dystopia. Thank you. And stay woke, bitches.
Apologies for the language. So as you can see, deepfake has become a technology that really has shaken up society in many ways, especially in political discourses. It's being used to influence elections. So at the beginning of this year, for example, we had a video of a deceased politician who was deceased back in 2018, a political figure of Indonesia, was a deepfake video emerged persuading people to vote for certain parties. In that video so far, only on Twitter itself, has been viewed by over 5 billion. Maybe not that much, but I have to check the numbers. But also, you might also be aware, deepfakes have also proliferated American, US election processes. Show of hands if you've seen the tweet of Trump using deepfake image to portray that Taylor Swift has endorsed him for presidency. Good, aware, very, very aware audience. And also, synthetic material has also become a problem, not just in political discourse. It has started to, it has become difficult to sustain knowledge systems such as Wikipedia, where a lot of AI-generated material is entering the Wikipedia repository. And I mean, if you are writing fiction, maybe having synthetically generated material may not be that much of a big deal. But if you are producing, historical figures and facts that actually didn't exist, this really leads to a much dire issue in maintaining actual historical facts and actual historical figures. So as a result, knowledge repositories such as Wikipedia have started assembling their own team that clears AI sludge that enters Wikipedia itself. And because of generative AI, because of synthetic material, we are also seeing metrics such as word frequency. This is a metric that traces the frequency of words that was used by humans, and it traces the evolution of those words. So this this tool has to be retired since I think 2021 because it has become difficult to differentiate what word is generated by what word is generated by machines and which one comes from humans itself. Another one is the Ngram. This is an academic tool again that documents and traces the evolution of language that's used by humans. As it's becoming difficult, as again AI-generated books are entering, Google Books and academic published material and so on, making the tools such as the Ngram obsolete. What worries me the most is, when companies such as Google are asked about this, this is what's happening, and what mitigating mechanisms do you have in place, and what can be done about it? The answer tends to be, more of like meh. As you can see, highlighted in pink here, the response from Google on the issue of Ngram was that. They said that they will continue to evaluate their approach as the world of book publishing evolves. So this is another way of saying that Google won't be doing much about it. And also, I mean, due to these technologies producing very real-looking images or text material or as you saw, voice material has become so easy. And recently, Google has introduced a technology called Reimagine, as again, they are moving to producing phones. So if you have, the Pixel 8, the Magic Editor, can allow you to remove any material from an image or to add something to an image just within seconds. So here you can see the original image and the AI-altered or AI-generated image side by side. Again, with very little mitigation problems, with very little safeguards in place. And even everywhere you look at these days, even in social media platforms such as Facebook, it has become very common to see images going viral, images that tend to make people feel good. Here, for example, a grandma supposedly celebrating her 121 year, again, AI-generated image, or an image of a boy with 3 hands saying that I made this with my hands, but no one appreciates this. So these kind of images, again, at the outset seem not that consequential, but it contributes to the pollution of knowledge systems, information systems as a whole, but also it has much dire consequence in the AI development pipeline itself. As I mentioned, a lot of the training material for AI, whether it's image, text, video, or audio material, predominantly comes from the internet. In fact, the AI revolution didn't just take off because we have new AI techniques or new revolutionary ideas. What really made the AI revolution is the internet, because it made a lot of training material available. So it has a much more deeper consequence for AI itself, because, as I said, a lot of the training material comes from the World Wide Web, and a lot of that material somehow gives AI systems what we would call, ground truths, or what the reality on the ground might look like through, that massive amounts of data that's gathered from people. However, as we have generative systems becoming more popular, and as AI-generated synthetic material is being put back into the World Wide Web, now it's difficult to distinguish, material that comes from humans or that comes from or that's generated synthetically. And as the training data is populated by synthetic material, the more our training data contains synthetic material, the more the models that we are building are likely to be useless, because this phenomenon is called model collapse, because there is no ground truth to compare it from. Because we don't have the distribution of the training data from which we can extract patterns from. So this leads to model collapse. So I don't know if they are too small, but if you can see here, you can see how, as the training data contains more and more synthetic material, you can see the prompts, the output of the model deteriorates more and more. So this is I think this is one of the reasons why maybe generative AI will collapse very soon. So this will bring us to the next poll and the last bit of the lecture. I know you are all ready for your drink, so I won't be holding you much. So let's have another poll. So when it comes to accountability, who or what should regulation focus on? I like this. It's my kind of audience. So I'm practically preaching to the choir, so to speak. Maybe I should have asked this earlier. Okay, this is good. All right. Good, good, good. I like this. So I think my job here is done. But we'll move on to just the last, subsection of the talk. This is good. Yeah, so we've seen, how the models themselves, fall short of the hype, what they are expected to do. We've also seen various ethical issues with harvesting data, sourcing data, cleaning data, and so on. We've seen how deeply consequential tools such as tools that allow us to generate deepfakes are released with very little safeguard, with very little care. This is all part of what is AI, what makes AI, what constitutes AI. Now we will just look at the environmental cost of AI, because again, this is one of the most consequential elements of AI, especially generative systems, but also the most neglected. Just to differentiate generative AI from other traditional AI, for those of you that might not be sure, so you can build AI systems to do pretty much any task. So the face recognition system I described earlier, it's a classification system, or it's an identification system where it classifies, after training is complete, it then classifies, if it's a face or not a face. So that kind of task is called classification. You also have predictive models. So the Amazon hiring algorithm is, for example, a predictive model based on what has happened in the past. It predicts what will likely happen in the future. So what differentiates generative AI is based on underlying data. By memorizing underlying data, it produces, it generates text or image. So for most of the talk here, we have focused on generative AI. And when we are talking about the energy requirements of AI, we are specifically focused on generative AI, because generative AI consumes a magnitude of much higher energy and water compared to traditional AI. So again, reports are coming out, especially over the past year, where they are showing that generative systems have, massive energy need. For example, according to this Bloomberg report, in the UK itself, AI is expected to suck up to 500% more energy over the next decade. And Goldman Sachs describes this as the kind of electricity growth that hasn't been seen in a generation. So just to compare traditional AI with generative AI, if you enter a query into a search engine, let's say Google, how much coffee should I drink per day? And then the Google search engine will give you answers. If you compare that, you enter the same prompt to a generative model such as ChatGPT, it uses approximately 10 times more energy to generate an answer compared to a traditional search engine, just to give you some context. So in countries like Ireland, for example, the amount of energy that's required to maintain AI systems is the same as all the household in the entire island, the energy consumption from the household of the entire country. Again, to give you some context, and this is based on reports that are reported by AI companies themselves and big tech corporations themselves. In fact, a recent analysis has come out and said a lot of what we know about the energy consumption of these AI companies is underreported. And this report claims that companies such as Microsoft, Google, Meta, and Apple underreport their energy consumption. In fact, the actual energy need is about 662% higher than what they have officially reported. This is before we even get into the water that is required to cool down data centers. So highlighted in red here, it shows you how much water that's required to cool data centers has, water need has grown over the past just 1 year. So for Google, for example, it's grown by 17%, for Microsoft by 22%, and for Meta by 17%. And this is often water that's used for drinking, because the water that's used to cool down data centers has to be pure, so that it doesn't cause, damage to servers and so on. So we are using water that usually goes to households. So again, we are focusing in Britain. Again, this is a very recent analysis that came out, I think, last week. So new data centers built in Britain over the next 5 years could require the same amount of water as the city the size of Liverpool. So, okay, I lied. This is the last bit of the talk. So a lot of the work I showed, whether it is evaluating actual models or whether it is exposing how vulnerable data workers are exploited, or the entire creative community, writing community, writers community have opened massive class action lawsuits against companies such as OpenAI, because their creativity, their material is used as training AI, again without any compensation. So a lot of this kind of work, even work that demonstrates the energy and water requirements of AI companies, is actively censored, is actively underfunded, is actively cut out. So Google, for example, again, to give you some concrete materials, Google itself came out and said that they prefer if their own researchers and scientists didn't portray Google technologies in negative lights. In other words, they really censor any critical voice. In fact, they have fired the entire ethics team, I think back in 2021. Show of hands if you remember this, when Timnit Gebru and Margaret Mitchell were fired. I'm with the right company. And I myself, as a researcher, have suffered from this, because some of my collaborators from within Google were not allowed to put their names in audit papers that we have worked on. So we have to throw out the entire experiment, because it was done by our Google collaborators. So censorship still exists within big companies. Those that are brave enough to still go ahead and publish, they face massive retaliation. Even very recently, within Google, a group of research scientists that have come together and opposed Google's, the fact that Google is working to supply surveillance technologies to genocide, and their opposition has resulted in this group of researchers being fired. So what I want to point out is that a lot of the kind of work that we do it's the dirty work, but it also faces so much problems. And so we've mentioned that, a lot of AI doesn't really stand up to scrutiny. The claims don't add up to or are not supported with empirical evidence. And there are plenty of areas where that is being realized, and some of it is actually, getting its due. so for example, this Detroit man, Robert Williams, he was sent to jail because of errors in facial recognition technology. Plenty of people, I think so far about 6 people in the US have gone to jail due to errors in facial recognition technology, and all of them tend to be black, 5 black men, 1 black woman. And he was the first one to actually sue, and he has got some justice for being wrongly accused. And we are seeing a lot more justice because as various lawsuits are coming to fruition because of errors in these AI systems. So, as you can see here, very recently the Justice Department in the US has sued an AI company for kind of adjusting a price scheme for landlords, so that in a way that reduces competition and in a way that encourages monopoly. And so in the UK itself, this was back at the peak of COVID. We've seen that the algorithm that was used to allocate grades had got the entire thing absolutely wrong, where A-level students were allocated grade by these algorithms based on factors such as area code and names, as opposed to the merit of the student itself. As a result, the algorithm was scraped and thrown out. In the Netherlands, they had an algorithm that allocates, that is supposed to catch fraudsters that are getting social welfare benefits, and it turned out to be, it was actually incorrect, and it led several people into, their children being taken away, some of them committing suicide and so on. So that was scraped again. So what I wanted to communicate with all this is, these systems always go wrong, and when they go wrong, when they fail, the people at the, at the bottom of society, the people that are most disfranchised in society, pay the highest price. Even when we have regulation, so the AI Act in Europe is supposed to be one of the best regulations we have, yet still it fails the most marginalized. So in this, for example, here, the AI Act prohibits any use of facial recognition in public spaces, except, for monitoring migration or for law enforcement. So again, what you see here is, even in regulation, there are loopholes that treat marginalized people as second-class citizens. So that's it. We come back to the first question we started with: can we trust AI? And I hope, I think I'm gone over time, but I hope throughout all these examples and empirical evidences, I hope I have convinced you that is the wrong question, because AI doesn't have agency. AI doesn't operate without the social and environmental infrastructure. AI doesn't deploy itself, but rather it's always developed and deployed by powerful corporations, governments, and so on. It's used to make decisions by people. AI itself doesn't do anything. So we should be asking, the right question we should be asking is, can we trust people in power developing and mass deploying AI instead of can we trust AI? And I will conclude at that, and hope we have some time for Q&A.
Thank you so much, Beba, for a fantastic talk. We are a bit over time, so I see a few of us may have to head out, but for those who can stay, we'll aim for at least a 15-minute Q&A session. So now we will open it up to all of you for this discussion with the Beba. And for those online, please use the Slido to submit or upvote many of the questions. I think we already have 22 questions there, so please take some time now to do that. For those in the live audience, if you raise your hand, we will bring a microphone to you. And when you speak, please make sure to speak into the mic so our online audience can hear you. I will just get us started with some online questions first so folks can start to put up their hands. But I just want to make sure we get some of these online questions addressed. So something interesting, and I think relates very well to your final point, Abeba, is that multiple people have cited the statistic that Gartner found that over 80% of enterprise AI projects fail, yet everyone is still trying to use AI. Why do you think companies and even NGOs come to believe in AI so strongly, even though it may be inscrutable or untrustworthy?
So that's a great question. I think it's a combination of factors. That being currently, we are at the peak of the hype cycle, where we tend to, kind of believe and perpetuate what AI companies are telling us about AI without actually critically scrutinizing their claims. So if you hear something that is too good to be true about AI, it very likely is to be too good to be true. AI is not godlike. AI is not magic. Most of complex tasks, it really fails to do, and so the hype cycle, and also, as I said, NGOs, governments, various public service institutes tend to see AI as a clever way to achieve, efficiency and to cut costs. So again, without actually scrutinizing the performance of AI systems, they tend to see it as opportunity, to remove people from these roles and to replace them with AI. So I think it comes down to financial incentives in treating AI as a quick way out. There are, of course, plenty other reasons, but those two would be the most predominant reasons why we tend to still deploy faulty AI or AI without critically examining its capabilities.
Thank you very much. So now over to the room, we will take 2 questions at a time, so hopefully we can get through more people. So maybe we can start here. I think there's, I see a microphone, amazing. So we'll start here, and then we also have a question there in the back too. Great, thank you.
So thank you very much. It's a very, very fascinating talk. So my question is to turn the discussion by 180 degrees and ask you, have you actually seen any good use cases of AI, any grassroots movements that really impressed you or give you some hope in the technology?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Because I wanted to communicate so much to this audience, I had to leave out some elements. And everybody hears, so much great things and positive potentials about AI, so that's very common. So for change, I want to focus on issues that tend to get very little attention. But of course, yes, there are plenty of great uses. And I'll give you a couple of examples. In New Zealand, for example, you have the Maori community that are building amazing language technologies, machine translation, and so on. And they are, it has like a completely different objective. It is completely removed from capitalist motives that we see with much of the current AI. They are building these language technologies because much of their language is dying due to British colonization they were forced to stop speaking their own language. So what they are doing is audio recording a lot of their elder members of the community, and based on that audio recording, they are building various language technologies to teach young people the language itself and so on. So that's a very good positive use case. I think that's a very good example. They also have their own, data management, data regulation documentation, where they are in control of the data, who can it share be with, what it can be used for, and so on. So those are really good examples. Another one in Bamako in Mali, you have again small community that are building various language technologies, again to aid teaching and learning within that community. So good use cases of AI tend to be found in these very small places where people are using AI systems to solve their own problems in a very small scale, as opposed to these massive scale AI technologies we tend to see.
Thank you so much for your talk. I wanted to ask you about AI regulation, please. Do you believe that, for example, the EU AI Act, do you think it's beneficial and helpful to eliminate the disadvantages or some of the harms that you spoke about in your talk that AI implementations can bring about?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, it's current AI regulations. You have to put it in relative terms compared to other initiatives, especially across the US, that we are seeing. The EU Act is much more stronger. First of all, because it's enforceable. If it's just a guideline or a recommendation, you leave it up to big corporations to actually do the due diligence, and that tends to not go well. So compared to a lot of what we have across the globe, the EU seems the strongest. But again, even within the EU AI Act, there still is happening so much lobbying. There has been so much corporate influence and capture throughout the development of the AI Act itself. So as a result, again, it tends to protect the interests of big corporations as opposed to marginalized groups. But again, compared to what we have currently, it's the strongest. That's my thinking.
I realize I made a mistake, and we didn't do two questions at the same time, so let's do that this time. So there's one question here, and does someone else have a mic? Oh, there's a mic there. Great, thank you. So maybe let's start here and then go here.
Do you think that the EU's general data protection regulation should apply to AI companies when it comes to the right to be forgotten?
In the white, please, if we could take your question.
What policy or regulatory changes do you think are most critical to ensuring accountability in the AI development, especially when it comes to preventing biased outcomes that disproportionately affect marginalized communities? Thank you.
Wow. So can I just admit I'm not really a regulatory person. A lot of the time I evaluate these systems. My expertise, my domain expertise is actually scrutinizing data sets and models. So my knowledge of regulation is very thin. People here like David Leslie might be better suited to answer, the GDPR question, and the right to be forgotten. That really is, beyond my pay grade, so I won't attempt that. But that one is a very broad and complex question. I mean, at the moment, a lot of regulation tends to really be advanced and written by and framed by, big tech representatives, big tech corporations. So that's why we are seeing, so even just over the past year, before we were talking about bias, discrimination, privacy, various concerns as major issues to tackle for regulation. But over the past year, the script has completely flipped. Now we are talking about compute power, compute threshold. So this is the kind of narrative that is pushed by existential risk advocates and people like Geoffrey Hinton and so on. It comes from the assumption that AI models are likely to be out of control, likely to become conscious and fully autonomous. And the higher the scale, the more parameters, the bigger the model, the chances of that AI tool becoming conscious. So as a result, now regulators are talking about at what compute threshold should we establish regulation. To me, this discussion makes absolutely no sense at all. But here we are, a lot of regulation being tangled in these questions. So what I want to say is, more involvement with civil society, more involvement, more consultation with impacted group, more involvement with people that are actually doing the critical work of evaluating these models would maybe lead to better framing, better understanding, and better development of regulation that protect the interests of marginalized groups. I know it's a long way to answer your question, but you asked a very complex, difficult question.
I'll ask a question online, and then we'll go back to the room. So perhaps in response to some of the challenges you pointed out, like hallucination or accuracy, we have seen some new supporting systems for AI systems, such as RAG, or Retrieval Augmented Generation, improve the accuracy for some AI products. What do you think about these advancements in tackling some of the challenges you've brought up in the talk?
So that is both good, but when it comes to some issues, useless. It's good in that having human feedback in the loop reduces hallucination. It grounds the output to be grounded in actual data. But on the other hand, when it comes to bias and discrimination, a couple of the papers I showed you is exposing covert racism. In the example with dialects. And what they found in that experiment, in that study, is that actually having human in the loop, having human feedback made these covert racisms much more pronounced, much more worse. So, techniques like RAG don't solve problems such as, implicit and covert racism, but it might reduce the chances of hallucination.
Thank you. All right, back over to the room. I see that we have a mic right there. Thank you. And then, and then a mic right there. Oh, wow, so many mics in the room. All right, so why don't we start here, and then we'll move to the back. So we'll just take 1, 2, 3.
Hi. Thanks so much for the talk. I basically, because I wrote loss of control into the Slido, I wanted to address that. Maybe I meant more lack of control. My background is in psychology, so I don't think AI works like human intelligence, but I also don't know how relevant that is if it's coming to certain conclusions and giving certain outputs. And I just hear from a lot of people that it tends to be a black box, the artificial neural networks. And I wanted to know if that's true in your opinion, that it is a black box, and if it is, isn't that conducive to lack of control as well if we don't know what it's really doing?
Thank you. I think there's another question in the blue jumper. Please go ahead.
My question was, given the amount of ethical and sustainability issues, as well as the fact that ethicists at these big companies are penalized for standing up for these issues, how do we avoid slipping into techno-fatalism or existential and political exhaustion around AI?
Yeah, great question. So I'll start with lack of control coming from the perspective of psychology. So that is a fair point, and that is a fair understanding of lack of control. Yes, indeed, a lot of these systems are black boxes. I mean, there are several techniques that provide some kind of explainability to some of the AI systems we have. but in general, we tend to, you give them training data, you are giving instruction, this is what things should look like, and then it produces output without any explanation as to how that output is generated, or that, classification is made, or how that prediction is made, and so on. So they do tend to remain black box. However, when it comes to lack of control, again, that's, I think, how you mean it and how it's said in the, in the AI safety community, in the AI ethics community might have a slightly different connotation. Lack of control often within these spaces refers to AI becoming super powerful and humans losing control to that system. So that is often what lack of control means in the existential risk community. And my criticism is to the latter definition of lack of control as opposed to the black box understanding. And the second question, retaliation and so on. Yes, that's a good question. I think, again, these issues are very complex. It's not just big corporations and AI companies that are systematically censoring or retaliating against their workers. Even in academic departments, in the AI, in the research space, these departments that are doing the critical work tend to be, under-resourced, or the first to face, the first to be fired when there are cuts. There are several things we can do. One of them is within big corporations, establishing mechanisms that allow, that protects whistleblowers. Maybe not even just AI companies, even in academic institutions, having a clear policy protecting whistleblowers, and also, generally and publicly normalizing this kind of critical work as important first step, not as something that is pitched against innovation, but this kind of, critical work actually contributes to building better AI systems. So a change of attitude in how we value and how we view this kind of work also will contribute.
I think we have time for just one more question. I think there's a mic in the back. So you in the back are the final one. Go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for just addressing how much of this existential risk nonsense has been, just keeps on coming and making money in all kinds of research positions, but also selling books, selling YouTube videos, whatever, that people like to talk about existential risk, at the cost of not mentioning some kind of social technology that actually protects the vulnerable people that will then have to suffer the consequences of the greater inequality and all the consequences of having higher efficiency and cutting costs. What are your thoughts on basic income as being one of these social policies and social technologies that we could use to support and lift these vulnerable communities?
Yeah, that's a great question. Just like my knowledge of regulation is very thin, my knowledge of economics and basic incomes and so on is also very limited. But however, I'll provide maybe a slightly different answer to your question. I can't really say anything about whether the idea of basic income will mitigate the most impacted or the most vulnerable. But one thing for sure that will mitigate a lot of the issues that we talked about today is, having a clear regulation that is written, that is developed with the interest, with the welfare of most of the public population, more particularly the most marginalized. Even with our day-to-day interactions, your phone serves as a massive data harvesting tool for AI companies. There is like the whole AI industry can be sustained because of this data pipeline, your interactions, your social media presence and so on. That data is harvested, it's aggregated, maybe sold to third parties, maybe it's used by AI companies to train models, and it comes back to actually, bite each of us. If you are looking for a loan, a mortgage, insurance, job, and so on, that data that is kind of gathered from you then comes back to impact you in assessing how qualified you are, whether you should get a loan, and so on. So even basic mechanisms to ensure things like this, exploitative practices, are actually mitigated. Again, this can be done through regulation. Enforceable regulation is the most, the best mechanism. So first steps like this, and making sure that a lot of really bad AI, we tend to have this perception that AI is inherently good, so we all push for access to AI for everybody. But I mean, some of that can actually be harmful. So again, regulations that ensure a lot of unverified AI, pseudoscientific AI is regulated. Those kind of approaches would be much more effective and impactful to protecting marginalized communities.
Unfortunately, that's all we have time for, but thank you for joining us and for all the fantastic questions. Right after this, we'll have our drinks reception, which will be right outside this room. Your first glass of wine or beer is on us, so folks will be handing out tokens right at the door. There's also a skills booth if you'd like to chat with someone from the Turing Skills team. An announcement to make is that our next Turing lecture will be delivered by Professor Shannon Valor on December 9th, where she'll be exploring the question, can we live with AI? So if you scan the QR, you can get more information about that. And finally, I know it's been a long evening. Thank you all for staying with us. On behalf of everyone at the Turing Institute and the Knowledge Quarter, a huge thank you to Abeba for delivering tonight's lecture. Let's give her a final round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.